The preludes to Custer's last stand and his missteps along the Rosebud River mark some of the most scrutinized and debated episodes in American history. Few events evoke as much passion and controversy as the Battle of Little Bighorn, a clash that has captivated historians, military enthusiasts, and the public alike for generations. At the heart of this dramatic confrontation stands Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer, a figure whose legacy is as complex as it is contentious. Yet the spotlight often narrows to focus solely on Custer, overshadowing the broader tapestry of events and decisions that led to the battle's tragic outcome. Discussions surrounding Little Bighorn frequently devolve into a blame game, where Custer and his subordinates, Major Marcus Reno and Captain Frederick Benteen, are scrutinized for their perceived failures. Critics dissect Custer's aggressive strategies and questionable timing, while others question Reno's cautious maneuvers and Benteen's ambiguous loyalties. However, this tendency to pin the entire outcome on individual personalities oversimplifies a multifaceted military operation and obscures the intricate interplay of factors that shaped the battle. No single officer operated in a vacuum. Rather, each made decisions influenced by intelligence, terrain, morale, and the relentless pressure of impending conflict. What often gets lost in these heated debates is the nuanced reality that accountability in such a complex engagement cannot be solely attributed to one person or even a small group of leaders. The Battle of Little Bighorn was not just a confrontation between soldiers and warriors, but a culmination of strategic miscalculations, environmental challenges, and the formidable resilience of the Sioux and Cheyenne forces. By fixating on the actions of Custer and his immediate command, we risk overlooking the broader context that includes logistical constraints, communication breakdowns, and the unpredictable nature of warfare. To truly understand the Battle of Little Bighorn, it is essential to step back and view it as a military operation embedded within its proper historical framework. This perspective allows us to move beyond the simplistic narrative of heroism and failure, enabling a deeper exploration of the strategic decisions, cultural clashes, and environmental factors that influence the battle's outcome. For instance, examining the intelligence failures, such as the unreliable reports from scouts and the ambiguous movements of the Sioux and Cheyenne, provides insight into the operational challenges faced by Custer and his men. Additionally, understanding the broader geopolitical tensions and the relentless push of westward expansion adds layers of complexity to the motivations and actions of all parties involved. Challenging conventional wisdom requires us to question long-held assumptions and consider alternative interpretations of the evidence. Perhaps Custer's aggressive tactics, often vilified, were driven by the urgent imperative to assert military dominance in a rapidly changing frontier landscape. Or maybe Reno and Benteen's more measured approaches, criticized for their lack of decisiveness, were in fact prudent responses to the overwhelming odds they faced. By placing the battle within this comprehensive framework, we can uncover conclusions that may initially seem counterintuitive or controversial, but ultimately offer a richer, more accurate understanding of this pivotal moment in American history. Moreover, this approach invites us to appreciate the human elements that often get overshadowed by the grand narratives of victory and defeat. The soldiers on both sides were driven by a mix of duty, survival, and deeply ingrained cultural values. Their personal stories, fears, and aspirations add a profound emotional dimension to the historical facts, reminding us that behind every statistic and strategic move were individuals grappling with the immense pressures of war. In re-examining the Battle of Little Bighorn through this multifaceted lens, we not only honor the complexity of the event, but also gain valuable lessons about leadership, decision-making, and the unpredictable nature of conflict. It challenges us to look beyond the surface and seek a deeper, more empathetic understanding of the past, fostering a more informed and nuanced perspective that transcends the simplistic binaries of blame and heroism. By embracing this comprehensive and empathetic approach, we move closer to truly grasping the intricate dynamics that defined Custer's last stand. This, in turn, enriches our appreciation of history, allowing us to learn from the past's triumphs and tragedies with greater clarity and insight. To truly grasp the complexities of the Battle of Little Bighorn, one must approach the narrative with an open mind, setting aside preconceived notions and ready to challenge long-held beliefs. The sequence of events that culminated in this fateful confrontation did not begin with the clash of weapons on the battlefield, but rather unfolded in the days leading up to the encounter, particularly on June 22, 1876. It was on this pivotal day that Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer received his orders from Brigadier General Alfred Terry. This moment marked a significant turning point, not just for Custer, but for the entire campaign. For the first time in his career, Custer was entrusted with the responsibility of leading his full command up Rosebud Creek, an area that was crucial in the Montana Territory. Historians such as James Willert, John S. Gray, and Edgar Wuss Stewart have delved deeply into the context surrounding this operation, providing insights into the motivations and implications of Custer's actions. They emphasize that Custer's movement toward Rosebud Creek was not a random decision, but a strategic maneuver based on intelligence reports indicating that the Sioux and Cheyenne tribes had congregated near the Little Bighorn River. Understanding Custer's orders is vital to comprehending the broader implications of the battle. Terry's instructions were anything but straightforward. Custer was granted a significant degree of discretion in how he executed these orders. This freedom, however, has often been overemphasized and misunderstood in various interpretations of the battle. While some narratives portray Custer as a reckless commander, driven by ambition and glory, a closer examination reveals a more nuanced picture. Custer's tactical decisions were influenced by various factors, including the geography of the terrain, the dynamics of the Native American tribes, and the urgency of the situation. As he moved his forces, Custer faced the challenge of coordinating a large command while navigating the complex relationships between different factions. The Sioux and Cheyenne were not a monolithic group. They were composed of various bands with their own leaders, cultures, and interests. This diversity added layers of complexity to the battlefield dynamics that Custer had to consider. The intelligence Custer received painted a picture of a vast gathering of Native American warriors, creating an atmosphere of urgency and pressure. The prospect of engaging such a formidable force could have influenced Custer's approach. Historians argue that rather than merely seeking glory, Custer was attempting to act decisively in the face of a potential threat. His movement towards the Little Bighorn was a calculated risk, one that he believed would secure a strategic advantage over the enemy. As Custer's forces advanced, the tensions mounted, and the impending confrontation loomed ever closer. The days leading to the battle were marked by anticipation and uncertainty. The troops, composed primarily of the 7th Cavalry, were filled with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Custer's leadership style, charismatic yet sometimes impulsive, played a significant role in shaping the morale of his men. His ability to inspire loyalty and courage was counterbalanced by a reputation for taking bold risks, which would ultimately have profound consequences. In the context of the battlefield, the terrain itself presented a formidable challenge. The rolling hills, river valleys, and natural features of the landscape became critical components in the unfolding drama. Custer had to not only contend with the enemy, but also with the physical challenges posed by the environment. The decisions he made regarding the positioning of his troops and their advance toward the enemy were intricately tied to the topography of the area. Meanwhile, the Sioux and Cheyenne warriors, led by formidable leaders such as Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, were preparing for their defense. They had their own strategies and motivations, deeply rooted in their cultural understanding of warfare and survival. The gathering of forces was not merely a reaction to Custer's movements. It was a culmination of years of tension, conflict, and the desire to protect their lands and way of life. As the stage was set for the battle, the historical context cannot be overlooked. The 19th century was a time of significant upheaval for Native American tribes, who faced encroachments on their territories and a relentless push from settlers and the U.S. government. The conflicts were not just military engagements, they were battles for identity, culture, and existence. For many tribes, the outcome of such confrontations determined their future and the survival of their traditions. When the fateful day arrived, the clash at Little Bighorn was more than a mere military confrontation. It became emblematic of the broader struggles faced by Native Americans during this tumultuous period. The battle was a poignant reminder of the complexities of colonial expansion and its impact on indigenous peoples. It encapsulated the tragic narratives of loss, resistance, and resilience that define the history of the United States. Custer's decisions in the heat of battle were influenced by a multitude of factors, including the realities of combat, the fog of war, and the limitations of intelligence. As his forces engaged with the Sioux and Cheyenne, the chaotic nature of battle unfolded. The initial successes Custer's men experienced soon gave way to overwhelming resistance, and the tide turned dramatically. The complexities of leadership, communication, and the unpredictable nature of warfare revealed themselves in the face of fierce opposition. Ultimately, the Battle of Little Bighorn stands as a pivotal moment in American history, one that continues to resonate today. It forces us to confront not only the narratives surrounding Custer and his forces, but also the broader implications of U.S. expansionism and its impact on indigenous communities. The lessons gleaned from this historical episode are essential for understanding the interplay of culture, power, and survival in the face of adversity. In conclusion, to engage with the story of Little Bighorn is to embark on a journey through history, one that challenges our perceptions and compels us to reconsider the narratives we have long accepted. By acknowledging the complexities surrounding the battle, including the context of Custer's orders and the dynamics of the Sioux and Cheyenne tribes, we gain a deeper appreciation for the significance of this moment. It is a story of conflict, resilience, and the enduring struggle for identity, a narrative that is as relevant today as it was over a century ago. While some argue that Custer was given carte blanche to act as he pleased, such claims reveal a misunderstanding of military protocols and the nuances of command. The orders issued to Custer, while seemingly granting him considerable freedom of action, were actually bound by specific conditions that required him to maintain close contact with enemy forces and adhere to established scouting duties. Nowhere in General Terry's directives was Custer permitted to disregard these essential responsibilities or to engage in battle prematurely without ensuring the security of his flanks. General Terry's orders emphasized the strategic necessity of keeping in contact with Colonel John Gibbon's column, as well as preventing any Native American forces from escaping to the south or southeast. This critical directive was not merely procedural, it was fundamental to the overarching strategy of the campaign. Terry understood that maintaining communication and positioning were vital for a successful engagement against the combined forces of the Sioux and Cheyenne. Custer's fatal misjudgment lay in his hasty advance toward the Little Bighorn. In his eagerness to confront the enemy, he neglected crucial scouting duties, particularly around Tulloch's Creek, and failed to secure his left flank, as Terry had explicitly instructed. This oversight created a significant vulnerability, allowing potential Native American forces to slip past him unnoticed, which would ultimately contribute to the chaos and disarray that characterized the battle. As Custer moved rapidly into enemy territory, he lost sight of the importance of reconnaissance. Proper scouting would have provided him with essential intelligence about the enemy's strength and positioning, allowing for a more informed tactical approach. Instead, his rush to engage left him blind to the realities on the ground, undermining the very strategy that was supposed to guide his actions. Custer's decisions were influenced by a mix of ambition, confidence, and perhaps a degree of overestimation of his troops' capabilities. He believed that the element of surprise would work in his favor, but in doing so, he underestimated the strength and preparedness of the Native American forces. The Sioux and Cheyenne, aware of their terrain and motivated by their cultural ties and the urgency of defending their land, were ready for battle. The consequences of Custer's rapid advance were dire. As the battle unfolded, it became clear that his forces were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. The initial stages of the confrontation saw Custer and his men engaging in fierce fighting, but the lack of adequate support and the failure to secure strategic positions soon became apparent. The result was a chaotic and disastrous retreat, leading to a complete rout of Custer's command. In retrospect, the events surrounding the Battle of Little Bighorn serve as a cautionary tale about the importance of adhering to military protocol and the consequences of haste in decision-making. Custer's legacy is not solely defined by his tragic end, but also by the lessons learned from his actions. The complexities of leadership, strategy, and the need for thorough reconnaissance are principles that resonate beyond the battlefield, underscoring the importance of preparation and caution in any endeavor. Ultimately, the battle stands as a testament to the broader conflicts between the U.S. government and Native American tribes, illustrating the tragic consequences of misunderstanding and miscommunication in a time of war. As we reflect on this pivotal moment in history, it becomes clear that the interplay of strategy, leadership, and cultural dynamics shape the outcome in ways that continue to inform our understanding of military history and its enduring implications. Interestingly, in the aftermath of the Battle of Little Bighorn, the camp of Native American warriors grew even more formidable. Among those who joined the encampment was Little Wolf, a prominent northern Sutai Cheyenne chief. He reportedly led his people from the Red Cloud Agency in Nebraska to the battle area, a move that significantly bolstered the numbers already gathered in the valley. While historians debate the size of Little Wolf's band, some estimating as few as 7 lodges, while others claim it could have included as many as 1,000 individuals, the reality remains that the coalition of native warriors continued to swell even after the fighting had ceased. This detail is often overlooked in traditional narratives of the battle, yet it underscores the vast scope and unity of the native coalition that Custer faced. The number of warriors who converged at Little Bighorn was likely underestimated by Custer and his command. The combination of various tribes, including the Sioux and Cheyenne, represented a powerful alliance, motivated by a shared desire to defend their land and way of life against encroachment. Custer's decision to cut across to the Little Bighorn Valley prematurely had far-reaching consequences. In his rush to engage the enemy, he failed to secure critical positions and neglected to monitor the movements of various tribal groups. This oversight allowed some Sioux and Cheyenne warriors to escape to the south, a fundamental error that compromised the entire military operation. The escape of these warriors not only allowed them to regroup and join the fight later, but also diminished Custer's tactical advantages. The implications of these decisions are profound. Custer's inability to accurately assess the strength and organization of the native forces reflected a broader trend in U.S. military strategy at the time, one marked by overconfidence and a lack of respect for the capabilities and resolve of the Native American tribes. This misjudgment contributed to the catastrophic outcome for Custer and his command, reinforcing the need for a more nuanced understanding of the complexities at play in such conflicts. As the dust settled after the battle, the continuing influx of native warriors highlighted the resilience and unity among the tribes. It signified not just a reaction to Custer's actions, but a broader movement towards collective resistance against an oppressive force. This solidarity among the Native American tribes was driven by cultural ties, a shared history of struggle, and a fierce commitment to defending their homeland. The aftermath of the Battle of Little Bighorn serves as a poignant reminder of the broader conflicts that characterized the American West during this era. It reflects the clash of cultures, the struggle for identity, and the indomitable spirit of resistance among Native peoples. As we examine the battle through this lens, we gain a deeper appreciation for the complexities of the historical narrative, recognizing that the events of that day were not merely a military engagement, but a significant chapter in the ongoing struggle for sovereignty and justice. In the end, the story of Little Bighorn is one of tragic miscalculation, but it is also a testament to the enduring legacy of Native American resilience. The battle was not just an endpoint, it was a catalyst for ongoing resistance, shaping the course of history and influencing the narratives that followed. Custer's choices and the unfolding dynamics of the battle remain subjects of fascination and study, revealing the intricate tapestry of human experience that continues to resonate in contemporary discussions of history, identity, and the quest for understanding. This oversight by Custer, rather than being merely an act of arrogance or incompetence, played a crucial role in the catastrophic events that unfolded at Little Bighorn. By rushing ahead without properly securing his flanks, Custer inadvertently facilitated the scattering of the tribes he sought to contain. This dispersal made it impossible for him to deliver the decisive blow envisioned by General Terry and Colonel Gibbons. General Terry's strategic directives were clear and important. His instructions included a critical line that stated, "Should it be found, as it appears almost certain that it will be found, to turn towards the Little Horn." This suggests that Terry believed Custer would eventually encounter the enemy near the river, yet he emphasized that Custer should proceed southward, potentially as far as the headwaters of the Tongue River, before turning towards the Little Horn. Terry's insistence on maintaining contact with enemy forces, feeling constantly, however, to your left, was paramount for understanding the limitations placed on Custer's operational discretion. Despite various interpretations that suggest Custer had wide latitude in his actions, Terry's words effectively curtailed that freedom. They underscored that discretion was only permissible when Custer was in direct contact with the enemy. This critical context highlights the military protocols of the time and the expectations placed on commanders in the field. By neglecting these essential directives, Custer not only failed to execute his orders effectively, but also miscalculated the capabilities and readiness of the Native American warriors he faced. The consequences of this misjudgment became starkly evident as the battle progressed. Custer's rapid advance, driven by a desire for glory and a swift resolution, ultimately led to disarray among his forces. Without the necessary scouting and the strategic positioning of troops, the 7th Cavalry found itself vulnerable and outmatched. The native warriors, who had been observing Custer's movements, were able to regroup and launch a coordinated response that overwhelmed Custer's command. As the battle unfolded, the impact of Terry's strategic directives became increasingly apparent. Custer's decision to disregard the critical instruction to maintain his left flank proved disastrous. The Native American coalition, rather than being cornered and decisively defeated, was able to maneuver effectively and capitalize on the gaps in Custer's formation. The very tactics that were intended to encircle and contain the tribes instead allowed them the freedom to engage Custer on their own terms. In the larger context of the battle, Custer's failure to adhere to military protocols and his underestimation of the Native American forces reflect a broader pattern of overconfidence that characterized U.S. military strategy during this period. This tendency to dismiss the capabilities and strategies of indigenous peoples resulted in severe miscalculations, leading to a series of confrontations that often ended in tragedy for U.S. forces. In retrospect, the Battle of Little Bighorn serves not only as a moment of military failure, but also as a pivotal point in the ongoing struggle between the U.S. government and Native American tribes. It highlights the complexities of leadership, the importance of following orders, and the necessity of understanding the dynamics of warfare, particularly in a context as fraught and multifaceted as the one faced by Custer. Ultimately, the lessons learned from Custer's actions and the subsequent fallout of the battle continue to resonate in discussions of military strategy, leadership, and the interactions between cultures in conflict. The legacy of the Battle of Little Bighorn is a reminder of the need for humility in command and the importance of respecting the intricacies of the adversary's strategies. Lessons that remain relevant in military education and historical analysis today. In an insightful piece published in Blue and Gray magazine, former superintendent of Custer Battlefield Park, Neil Mangum, highlights a crucial aspect of Custer's orders that is often overlooked. Mangum explains that if the trail indeed led west toward the Little Bighorn, as Terry anticipated, Custer was not meant to follow it directly. Instead, his directive was to continue south up the Rosebud before veering west toward the Little Bighorn. This strategic maneuver was not simply a suggestion. It was a calculated tactic designed to prevent early detection by the Native American forces. By taking this approach, Custer could minimize the chances of the Sioux and Cheyenne scattering, a tactic they had perfected over generations. Just as Civil War partisan rangers under John Singleton Mosby had mastered guerrilla warfare to evade detection and outmaneuver their opponents, the Sioux and Cheyenne had developed strategies to protect their communities and evade U.S. forces. Terry's concerns were palpable. If the Sioux and Cheyenne dispersed, the likelihood of engaging in a decisive battle would vanish, and with it, the potential for a significant military victory. Fred Dustin, in his work The Custer Tragedy, echoes Mangum's sentiments, emphasizing that Terry had a clear understanding of the stakes involved. He recognized that the coalition of native warriors represented not only a formidable force, but also a complex web of alliances and strategies. Custer's hasty advance compromised the very objectives laid out by Terry and Gibbons, undermining the planned operation. This context is vital for understanding the dynamics at play during the Battle of Little Bighorn. Custer's decision to disregard these strategic directives illustrates a broader pattern of miscalculation that characterized his approach. His ambition and desire for glory overshadowed the tactical considerations that Terry had laid out. As Custer moved toward the Little Bighorn without the necessary precautions, he inadvertently played into the hands of the native forces, who were adept at using the terrain to their advantage. The failure to adhere to these tactical maneuvers highlights the importance of leadership in military operations. Effective command requires not only bravery, but also a deep understanding of strategy and the ability to anticipate the enemy's movements. Custer's lack of foresight and failure to recognize the implications of his orders ultimately led to disastrous consequences for his troops. Moreover, the narrative of the battle serves as a reminder of the complexities of warfare, particularly in a context as fraught as the one faced by Custer and his command. The Sioux and Cheyenne were not merely passive participants in this conflict. They were skilled and knowledgeable warriors with their own strategies and objectives. Their ability to adapt and respond to Custer's movements demonstrated their resilience and tactical acumen. As we reflect on the events leading to the battle, it becomes clear that the decisions made by Custer were shaped by a mix of ambition, urgency, and a fundamental misunderstanding of the enemy he faced. The insights provided by Mangum and Dustin underscore the critical importance of adhering to established military protocols and the necessity of thorough reconnaissance in any military engagement. Ultimately, the Battle of Little Bighorn stands as a testament to the tragic consequences of miscalculation in warfare. It illustrates how a failure to recognize the complexities of the battlefield can lead to catastrophic outcomes. The legacy of this battle continues to inform discussions about military strategy, leadership, and the interactions between cultures, reminding us of the lessons learned from history and the importance of humility in the face of conflict. He understood that the native forces were formidable enough that a coordinated effort between Custer and Gibbon was essential to trap and defeat them. General Terry recognized the strategic imperative. If either commander acted alone, the tribes would likely scatter, jeopardizing not only their chances of success, but also putting U.S. forces at risk of a possible disaster. Terry's fears regarding the size of the Sioux and Cheyenne coalition were not unfounded. He suspected that the band had grown even larger, a belief that would tragically prove correct. Warfare involves stakes that are far higher than those in most professions. In business, errors often result in lost profits or missed opportunities, but in military operations, a miscalculation can lead to lost lives and shattered communities. The stakes of battle are immeasurable, and the consequences of failure reverberate beyond the battlefield, affecting families, tribes, and nations. Each decision made in the heat of conflict carries with it the weight of potential tragedy. In the military, a misstep in planning or execution can have fatal consequences. This reality underscores the importance of clear orders and strict adherence to established protocols. Orders are issued with the understanding that they serve a specific strategic goal, and the integrity of these directives is paramount. Although Custer's instructions permitted a degree of flexibility, the potential for catastrophic outcomes increased significantly when he chose to ignore or alter them, especially when those orders originated from a general officer. Custer's inclination to act independently, driven by his ambition and desire for glory, clouded his judgment and led him to make choices that disregarded the tactical realities of the situation. His decision to advance without securing his flanks and failing to coordinate with Gibbon's forces was not merely a tactical blunder. It was a profound misjudgment of the enemy's capabilities and the nature of the conflict. Terry's concerns about the native forces were based on an understanding of their strengths and the historical context of their resistance. The Sioux and Cheyenne were not only skilled warriors, they were also adept at utilizing their knowledge of the terrain and their ability to mobilize quickly. The prospect of facing a unified and determined enemy required a level of cooperation and strategic planning that Custer ultimately undermined. As the battle unfolded, the repercussions of Custer's actions became painfully evident. The failure to execute a coordinated strategy led to a chaotic and disorganized confrontation, ultimately resulting in a devastating defeat for U.S. forces. The losses incurred by Custer and his men were not just a reflection of their bravery, but also a consequence of the failure to heed the strategic directives that were intended to guide their actions. The lessons learned from this tragic episode resonate with military leaders and strategists even today. They serve as a reminder of the critical importance of communication, collaboration, and adherence to orders in the face of adversity. The stakes in warfare are uniquely high, and the price of failure can be tragically steep. As we reflect on the events surrounding the Battle of Little Bighorn, we must consider the implications of leadership, the necessity of strategic planning, and the enduring legacy of those who fought bravely on both sides of the conflict. Had Custer chosen to fully embrace the discretion granted by General Terry, it would have been essential for him to do so in circumstances where such flexibility would enhance the operation rather than jeopardize it. In this instance, invoking his escape clause proved catastrophic. General Terry's plans were explicitly outlined. He directed Custer to advance up the Rosebud with the intention of eventually heading west toward the Little Bighorn. This maneuver was designed to create a pincer movement that would effectively trap the native forces alongside Colonel Gibbon's troops. Despite the clarity of Terry's strategic framework, Custer made the critical decision to diverge from these orders. After the battle, Captain Robert Patterson Hughes, Terry's aide-de-camp, placed the blame squarely on Custer's shoulders for forcing Terry's hand. Hughes argued that Custer's premature actions compelled Terry to abandon his planned route through Tulloch's Creek, thrusting him instead into the treacherous terrain of the Badlands. This shift not only complicated Terry's advance, but also significantly impaired his ability to provide timely support to Custer. Hughes believed that if Custer had followed orders and conducted a thorough reconnaissance of Tulloch's Creek, Terry would have had a more favorable path toward the Indian village. This would have allowed for a well-coordinated attack, potentially changing the outcome of the engagement. Custer's failure to adhere to these directives deprived Terry of a critical strategic option and made it nearly impossible for him to reinforce Custer effectively. The implications of this miscalculation were profound. The absence of coordination between Custer and Terry, stemming from Custer's decision to act independently, created a gap that the Sioux and Cheyenne were quick to exploit. The well-organized native forces were able to counter Custer's movements effectively, leading to a chaotic and disjointed confrontation that culminated in a devastating defeat for the U.S. Army. This episode underscores the vital importance of following military orders and the inherent dangers of overstepping command. In warfare, the alignment of strategy and execution is crucial. The failure to maintain that alignment can have disastrous consequences. Custer's actions not only compromised his own position, but also weakened the overall strategic effectiveness of the campaign. In retrospect, the Battle of Little Bighorn serves as a cautionary tale about the complexities of leadership in the military context. It emphasizes the need for commanders to act not only with courage, but also with a clear understanding of their orders and the larger strategic goals at play. Custer's legacy is a poignant reminder of the necessity for cooperation and adherence to tactical directives, illustrating that in the realm of warfare, the stakes are incredibly high, and the cost of failure can be insurmountable. As we analyze this critical moment in history, it is essential to recognize that the interplay between individual ambition and collective strategy can shape the outcomes of conflicts in profound ways. The lessons learned from Custer's decisions and their repercussions continue to resonate, providing valuable insights into military leadership, strategy, and the importance of unity in the face of adversity. While Hughes's claims may appear to be an attempt to assign blame in hindsight, his analysis carries considerable merit. Had Custer adhered to Terry's orders, the 7th Cavalry could have approached the Little Bighorn Valley from the south rather than through the treacherous terrain of Reno Creek. This misjudgment stands out as one of Custer's most egregious tactical errors, a critical factor that must be taken into account when assessing the battle's outcome. Custer's actions at Little Bighorn stemmed from a significant deviation from Terry's strategic plan. Although some of his battlefield tactics could be viewed as defensible in isolation, the context in which they were executed casts a long shadow over his decisions. The failure to follow established orders not only jeopardized his command, but also altered the dynamics of the engagement, ultimately leading to disastrous results. One cannot help but speculate about the potential consequences had Custer survived the encounter and managed to secure even a marginal victory. History might have remembered him in a very different light, elevating his reputation as a military leader and potentially altering the trajectory of his career. Yet, regardless of the outcome, the fallout from his disobedience would likely have continued to linger. Military reputations and careers are often built upon the outcomes of critical engagements, and Custer's failure at Little Bighorn would have cast a long shadow over his legacy. In the wake of the battle, many of Custer's contemporaries were eager to distance themselves from his failure. The ramifications of his actions not only affected his own reputation, but also impacted the broader perception of the U.S. military's capabilities and strategies in dealing with Native American tribes. The defeat at Little Bighorn was not just a personal loss for Custer. It was a significant setback for U.S. military efforts in the West, calling into question the effectiveness of their strategies and leadership. Moreover, the context of Custer's decisions sheds light on the intense pressures faced by military leaders during this period. The desire for personal glory, combined with the urgency of the situation, can lead to choices that overlook critical strategic considerations. Custer's ambition drove him to take risks that, in hindsight, proved detrimental not only to himself, but to his command and the broader military objectives at stake. Ultimately, the Battle of Little Bighorn serves as a poignant reminder of the complexities of military leadership, where the interplay of individual ambition and adherence to strategy can shape outcomes in profound ways. The lessons learned from this historical episode emphasize the importance of discipline, strategic foresight, and the necessity of unity in command. Custer's legacy is a complex tapestry woven with threads of bravery, ambition, and tragic miscalculation, and it continues to inform our understanding of military history and leadership to this day. Speculation about the consequences of Custer's actions abounds, yet one can only wonder if the post-battle opprobrium would have been as severe had he lived to tell his side of the story. The summer campaign of 1876 was meticulously conceived long before the chaos of battle ensued. The plan involved 3 columns converging on the suspected location of the Sioux and Cheyenne, who were believed to be gathering in the Powder River country of eastern Montana. Brigadier General George Crook led the first column, departing Fort Fetterman in Wyoming Territory on March 1st with over 1,100 troops. Crook's campaign faced its own challenges. By March 17th, Colonel Joseph J. Reynolds, one of Crook's subordinates, engaged a Cheyenne village along the Powder River. Although he achieved a nominal victory, the retreat that followed was chaotic and disorganized, ultimately leading to Reynolds facing a court-martial for his mismanagement. Meanwhile, Colonel John Gibbon commanded the Montana column, leaving Fort Ellis on April 3rd. Despite battling fierce snowstorms, Gibbon's forces advanced eastward along the Yellowstone River, eventually linking up with Major James Sank's Brisbane's cavalry. This coordinated effort was vital to the overall strategy laid out by General Terry. General Terry, overseeing the Dakota Column, departed from Fort Abraham Lincoln on May 17th. His forces included the 738-man 7th Cavalry, which was tasked with pushing westward and establishing crucial supply depots. Coordination with Gibbon was paramount, as Terry aimed to contain the Sioux below the Yellowstone River while preparing for an engagement that would decisively alter the landscape of the conflict. Terry's plan was clear, and Custer's role was crucial in executing it. Yet, Custer's deviations from this strategy led to disaster, not only for himself, but for the soldiers who followed him into battle. While history has dissected his motives and actions endlessly, it's important to remember that the path to Little Bighorn was paved with critical decisions, many of which, like Custer's choice to bypass Tulloch's Creek, remain contentious points of debate to this day. Custer's failure to follow Terry's directives was emblematic of a larger issue: the tension between individual initiative and adherence to collective strategy. His actions on the battlefield were not just reflections of personal ambition, but also indicative of a military culture grappling with the challenges of leadership and decision-making in high-stakes situations. Had he chosen to operate within the framework established by Terry, the course of the campaign, and indeed, history, might have unfolded differently. The consequences of his deviations were not merely tactical failures. They resulted in the loss of lives and the ultimate collapse of what could have been a decisive military engagement. The tragedy of Little Bighorn continues to serve as a stark reminder of the critical importance of discipline and strategic coherence in military operations. It highlights how the choices made by leaders in moments of pressure can reverberate far beyond the battlefield, shaping perceptions, legacies, and historical narratives for generations to come. As we reflect on Custer's decisions and their aftermath, we recognize that the battle was not merely a clash of arms, but a complex interplay of strategy, leadership, and cultural dynamics. The questions surrounding what might have been serve to remind us of the intricate web of factors that influence historical events and the enduring legacy of those involved in them. June 22nd marked the 37th day of the grueling campaign for General Terry, Custer, and the 7th Cavalry. This was no ordinary military operation. It was a campaign defined by physical hardship, relentless pursuit, and an elusive enemy. The soldiers contended with unforgiving weather conditions and harsh landscapes while trying to track a foe that seemed to vanish as easily as smoke. Despite some fleeting glimpses of war parties and a few sightings reported by Lieutenant James H. Bradley, Gibbon's chief of scouts, the Sioux and Cheyenne forces remained mysteriously absent, evading capture and creating an atmosphere of tension and uncertainty. It wasn't until Custer was on the verge of ascending the Rosebud that the realization dawned upon him. The native forces were likely holed up in the Little Bighorn Valley. Yet even at this critical juncture, their exact position was misjudged. The Indian camp was discovered in the lower portion of the valley rather than the upper, a critical error that would have profound implications for the battle's outcome. The stakes of the mission were extraordinarily high. A successful surprise attack was essential. The tribes were known for their ability to scatter if given even the slightest warning, which could derail the entire campaign and leave U.S. forces vulnerable. Ironically, as the 7th Cavalry moved through the territory, they did so undetected by the Sioux, a fact that could have worked to their advantage. General Terry made several strategic moves to assist Custer, including assigning experienced scouts George Herendeen, Mitch Boyer, and 6 Crow Scouts to bolster Custer's column. These seasoned scouts brought invaluable knowledge of the terrain and the behaviors of the native tribes, which could have enhanced the effectiveness of Custer's maneuvers. Personal dynamics played a subtle yet significant role in this campaign. As the regiment paraded before their departure, Gibbon allegedly called out to Custer with a half-joking warning, "Now, don't be greedy, Custer. There are enough Indians for all of us." This lighthearted exchange underscored the camaraderie between the commanders, but it also hinted at Custer's infamous ambition and desire for glory. The banter suggested a competitive spirit, perhaps a recognition of the stakes involved and the need for cooperation amidst a backdrop of individual aspirations. Gibbon later reflected on this scene with surprising nostalgia, recalling Custer as upbeat and proud of his well-prepared troops, each mounted on strong horses, many of them part-blooded Kentucky stock. This sense of pride and camaraderie was palpable, yet it masked the underlying tensions and the pressures that would soon emerge in the face of battle. The enthusiasm displayed by Custer and his men was commendable, but it also belied the seriousness of their mission and the grim realities they were about to confront. As they advanced toward the Little Bighorn, the 7th Cavalry was propelled by a mix of confidence and anticipation. Yet the elusiveness of their enemy created an ever-present uncertainty. The inability to accurately locate the Sioux and Cheyenne forces not only heightened the stakes of their engagement, but also added layers of complexity to Custer's strategy. His decisions, informed by ambition and a desire for decisive victory, would soon collide with the harsh realities of warfare and the formidable tactics of the native tribes. This blend of personal dynamics, strategic oversight, and the challenges of the campaign set the stage for the dramatic confrontation that was to follow. As the 7th Cavalry marched toward their fate, the weight of history loomed large, reminding us that the interplay of individual ambition and collective strategy would shape not just the outcome of this battle, but the legacy of those involved for generations to come. The events that unfolded would ultimately become emblematic of the tragic complexities of the American West, where ambition, strategy, and survival intertwined in a defining moment of conflict. As the column, laden with its mules and soldiers, headed toward the Rosebud Valley, the moment was infused with both hope and an unrecognized sense of foreboding. By 12:40 p.m., the regiment reached the mouth of the Rosebud, a deceptively small creek nestled in a broad valley, surrounded by imposing high bluffs and sage-covered hills. Lieutenant George Nick Wallace of G Company humorously described the creek as barely 3 feet wide and mere inches deep, a stark contrast to the formidable challenges that lay ahead. The terrain was rough, the weather uncooperative, and logistical issues compounded their struggles. Even the mule packs, crucial for transporting supplies, had to be resecured due to the negligence of civilian packers who had tied them improperly, adding to the frustrations of an already arduous day. Despite the presence of Arikara scouts like Bobtail Bull and Soldier, who were sent ahead to gather intelligence, they remained close to the column, wary of potential Sioux ambushes. The tension within the ranks was palpable. Major Marcus Reno, who had previously scouted the Rosebud Valley against orders, had faced reprimand from both Terry and Custer. They worried that Reno's actions might have inadvertently tipped off the Sioux to their presence. This strain created an uncomfortable dynamic within the column, particularly when they set up camp after only advancing a meager 12 miles. Custer's decision-making was now under close scrutiny, heightening the sense of unease. That evening, the officers convened, and tensions flared once again between Custer and Fred Benteen. Conflict was not uncommon in their rocky relationship. Yet, to the surprise of his men, Custer adopted a more conciliatory tone during this meeting. He even sought their input, a rare gesture for a commander known for his self-assuredness and dominant presence. This shift in demeanor suggested a recognition of the mounting pressures and the need for unity among his officers. During the meeting, Custer revealed intelligence he had received from Washington, estimating around 3,000 Indians in the area, with 850 identified as warriors. However, ever the pragmatist, Custer suspected this number was too low and added an additional 500 warriors to his own estimates. This assessment underscored his acute awareness of the adversaries they faced and the potential for an overwhelming confrontation. Custer's efforts to foster a collaborative atmosphere among his officers, while commendable, could not fully mitigate the underlying tensions. The realities of the campaign weighed heavily on everyone involved, with the specter of the Sioux and Cheyenne forces looming larger as the day progressed. The juxtaposition of their ambitions against the formidable challenges presented by the landscape and their opponents created a volatile mix of hope and anxiety that would soon erupt into chaos. As they prepared for the next phase of their operation, the dynamics of leadership, strategy, and the pressures of warfare were brought into sharp focus. The events that unfolded would not only determine the fate of the 7th Cavalry, but also leave an indelible mark on the history of the American West, highlighting the intricate interplay between personal relationships and military decisions in the face of impending conflict. Custer may not have fully grasped that General Sheridan's efforts to control agency Indians would drive even more of them into the field during the summer, further increasing their numbers. This underestimation would tragically contribute to the unfolding events of the battle. In addition to assessing the enemy, Custer issued practical orders for his troops. He eliminated trumpet calls to maintain stealth and instituted a 3 a.m. wake-up call for the troops to begin marching by 5 a.m. He granted his troop commanders considerable autonomy, providing them with basic logistical guidelines while leaving much to their discretion, a surprising amount of leeway given the high-stakes circumstances they faced. Lieutenant Edward Settle Godfrey later remarked on Custer's unusual demeanor during this meeting. Typically brusque and commanding, Custer appeared subdued, perhaps reflecting underlying doubts or concerns about the impending battle. After the meeting engaged in a telling conversation with scouts Mitch Boyer, Bloody Knife, and Half Yellow Face. When Godfrey asked them how many Sioux they expected to confront, he estimated between 1,000 and 1,500 warriors. Boyer's chilling response, translated through the scouts, was ominous. "We are going to have a big fight." By June 23rd, as the column passed through the first of several abandoned Indian camps, Custer's confidence remained surprisingly high. He even criticized Reno for not pursuing the enemy more aggressively during his earlier scout, believing Reno had missed a crucial opportunity for glory. The regiment's march took them through a series of deserted campsites, each one serving as a silent reminder of the elusive enemy they were pursuing. By mid-afternoon, they crossed Greenleaf Creek and encountered another campsite, marking the farthest point Reno had reached. According to Cheyenne warrior Woodenleg, the valley began to narrow, with steep hills cloaked in pine, enhancing the sense of foreboding that permeated the air. As the regiment set up camp amidst the fragrant aromas of wild roses, plum, and crabapple trees, the lack of any visible Sioux added to the growing tension and mystery surrounding their mission. It was a serene yet foreboding moment, the calm before the storm that would soon engulf the 7th Cavalry. On the morning of June 24th, at 5 a.m., shortly after 5 Crow Scouts under Custer's command had headed upstream, the 7th Cavalry resumed its march. About 2 hours later, around 7 a.m., Custer issued orders to Heron Dean, directing him and Scout Charlie Reynolds to survey Tulloch's Creek. However, Heron Dean, backed by Mitch Boyer, cautioned that it was too early since they had not yet reached the area leading to the creek's headwaters. By 10:30 a.m., the column crossed Lame Deer Creek, marking the same location where Boyer had turned back just a week earlier on the 17th. This repetition of movements highlighted the ongoing challenges the cavalry faced, as well as the elusive nature of their enemy. The specter of battle loomed larger with each passing hour, a reminder that while the landscape was beautiful and tranquil, the stakes were incredibly high and the countdown to confrontation had already begun. As they pressed on, the tension among the officers and men continued to simmer beneath the surface. Custer's decisions, while bold, were increasingly scrutinized as the regiment neared the culmination of their arduous journey. The sense of anticipation hung heavy in the air, underscoring the fragility of their situation as they marched toward an uncertain fate. At that point, 4 Crow Scouts returned with a report of yet another abandoned Sioux camp near East Muddy Creek. As the command pushed further south, Heron Dean identified an Indian trail that veered off near Lame Deer Creek, prompting him to follow it briefly before turning back when it continued to diverge. By 1 p.m., Heron Dean had caught up with the column and informed Custer of his discovery. In response, Custer immediately ordered a halt. The troops paused in the area around East Muddy Creek, where they came upon what had once been the location of the 5th Sioux camp. Here, the trail left by the Indians widened to over a mile as the soldiers prepared coffee and a meal. Scouts were dispatched to retrieve Varnum from his advanced position, and once Varnum arrived, Custer instructed him to investigate the trail Heron Dean had found. Although Varnum initially objected, confident that his scouts would not have missed such a trail, he went nonetheless. After covering an additional 12 miles over the course of 2 hours, Varnum returned with confirmation. The trail did indeed diverge, but eventually rejoined the main path farther upstream. Lame Deer Creek merges with Rosebud Creek, creating a key crossing point where Lame Deer must be forded. The high banks of Rosebud Creek on the left made travel easier along the right bank, due to the valley opening on that side. At this juncture, the vast Indian Trail leading up Rosebud Creek grew so wide that it erased any clear passage across Lame Deer Creek. The scattered bands of Lakota at the rear of the migrating group likely deviated slightly, crossing Lame Deer Creek before cutting across the country to reconnect with the main trail. Historian Thomas M. Heskett suggested that Custer's decision to pause for several hours may have been influenced by a desire to wait for Varnum's return. However, this reasoning seems tenuous. Custer's impetuous nature doesn't align with the idea of waiting just to hear back from one officer. The halt may have had other motivations, such as Custer contemplating his next move or analyzing the fresh reports. Ultimately, Varnum confirmed that the trail rejoined the main path, and signs of the hostiles were becoming more frequent, hinting at a sizable force nearby. Around 4 p.m., the last of the Crow Scouts, White Swan, arrived, reporting a fresh camp at the forks of the Rosebud, though still no Indians were in sight. By 5 p.m., the 7th Cavalry was back on the move, cautiously continuing up the creek. Unfortunately, we lack direct insight into Custer's thoughts during this time, as most of those closest to him perished along with him. However, historian Charles Kuhlman surmised that the Crow Scouts' reports should have raised alarms for Custer. In his work, Legend into History, Kuhlman argued that the Crows' observations indicated the possibility of unexpected developments that should have prompted Custer to reconsider his strategy. It became apparent that the Indian trail they were following was created by a large force of Indians, many coming from agency settlements to join the camps at Little Bighorn. The fresh signs were a stark contrast to earlier reports of old trails, and while some recognized the significance, Lieutenant Godfrey noted that no one seemed fully aware of what they were truly facing. Earlier in Reno's scouting mission, Mitch Boyer had led scouts to a large camp where Sitting Bull had hosted a Sundance ceremony, though the site had been abandoned on June 8th. When Custer's troops reached this area, Godfrey noted the size of the campsite, which was significantly larger than any they had previously encountered. Yet the soldiers did not grasp the full implications of their findings. The winter camps had been fairly consistent in size, and Custer's men had grown complacent, underestimating the true scale of the gathering forces. Even as late as the evening before the battle, they seemed unaware of the additional bands joining the main body of Indians. Interestingly, James Willert proposed a theory that Mitch Boyer may have understood more than he let on. Boyer likely realized that while the camps appeared older, the trails connecting them were more recent, perhaps only a week old. This theory aligns with Lieutenant Bradley's earlier sighting of Sioux on the lower Rosebud on May 27th, nearly a month before Custer reached the Little Bighorn. The camp of 400 lodges had since been joined by more bands, increasing the numbers of the enemy force. By this point, the trail Reno had first reported had widened dramatically. Edgar Stewart recounted Reno's observations of the Great Indian Trail that measured over half a mile wide, created by the thousands of lodges and lodge poles left in the earth. The trail only grew wider as they advanced up the valley, at some point spanning over a mile, its furrowed earth resembling a plowed field. This was no ordinary movement. It was the passage of an immense, straggling assembly of Lakota and Cheyenne families spread out in a column that stretched for miles. By 5 p.m., the 7th Cavalry was back on the move, cautiously continuing up the creek. Unfortunately, we lack direct insight into Custer's thoughts during this time, as most of those closest to him perished along with him. However, historian Charles Kuhlman surmised that the Crow Scouts' reports should have raised alarms for Custer. In his work, Legend into History, Kuhlman argued that the Crows' observations indicated the possibility of unexpected developments that should have prompted Custer to reconsider his strategy. It became apparent that the Indian trail they were following was created by a large force of Indians, many coming from agency settlements to join the camps at Little Bighorn. The fresh signs were a stark contrast to earlier reports of old trails, and while some recognized the significance, Lieutenant Godfrey noted that no one seemed fully aware of what they were truly facing. Earlier in Reno's scouting mission, Mitch Boyer had led scouts to a large camp where Sitting Bull had hosted a Sundance ceremony, though the site had been abandoned on June 8th. When Custer's troops reached this area, Godfrey noted the size of the campsite, which was significantly larger than any they had previously encountered. Yet the soldiers did not grasp the full implications of their findings. The winter camps had been fairly consistent in size, and Custer's men had grown complacent, underestimating the true scale of the gathering forces. Even as late as the evening before the battle, they seemed unaware of the additional bands joining the main body of Indians. Interestingly, James Willard proposed a theory that Mitch Boyer may have understood more than he let on. Boyer likely realized that while the camps appeared older, the trails connecting them were more recent, perhaps only a week old. This theory aligns with Lieutenant Bradley's earlier sighting of Sioux on the lower Rosebud on May 27th, nearly a month before Custer reached the Little Bighorn. The camp of 400 lodges had since been joined by more bands, increasing the numbers of the enemy force. By this point, the trail Reno had first reported had widened dramatically. Edgar Stewart recounted Reno's observations of the Great Indian Trail that measured over half a mile wide, created by the thousands of lodges and lodge poles left in the earth. The trail only grew wider as they advanced up the valley, at some point spanning over a mile, its furrowed earth resembling a plowed field. This was no ordinary movement. It was the passage of an immense, straggling assembly of Lakota and Cheyenne families spread out in a column that stretched for miles. What lay behind Custer's decision to forego the opportunity to scout Tulloch's Creek? With hindsight, one might argue that Custer was singularly fixated on the trail through Rosebud Valley. Yet, where was this path leading? Some historians speculate that Custer's judgment may have been swayed by unseen factors. Kuhlman, ever the strategist, might have discerned a golden opportunity amidst the chaos, possibly believing Custer was intent on a decisive confrontation. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Custer ordered another bivouac near a sharp bend in the Rosebud, marking not the end of the day's march, but the beginning of a fateful chapter in one of America's most infamous and contentious battles.